Hello, and welcome to Nale Yoga, the podcast with Yoga Nidra journeys for deep rest and more. I'm Ruthie Eisenberg, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Moish Feiglin is an integrative psychotherapist, breathwork guide, and musician whose work focuses on helping people reconnect with their bodies and authentic selves through presence, through breathwork, through spirit, and through music. He's the founder of Echo Healing, where he leads breathwork groups, retreats, and meditation experiences in Israel and internationally, blending music, nature, and community into his work, which brings together traditional psychotherapy with somatic and experiential practices, creating safe spaces for deep healing, presence, and transformation. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Moish, and I hope you are too. Enjoy. Hi, Moish. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So, why don't we get started with you sharing a little bit about how you got into working with breathwork?
Yeah, sure. So, my kind of journey into this work started probably 15 years ago when I went to social work school when I was still living in Australia and now living in Israel. And I did fairly classic kind of social work, doing community mental health, but was always interested in therapy and deeper work. But it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago that I kind of went through my own little, maybe not so little, but kind of dark night of the soul when I had a bit of struggling with depression and things changing in my life, that I started to learn about a healing process from a different place where the cognitive tools were not so helpful. And I was also working at the time, had a few psychedelic experiences, and was also introduced to breathwork at the time, and took a break from working with clients at that period. And as I was shifting back into working, really wanting to work like somatically with the body in a safe way and in a trauma informed way. And that's what led me to doing this amazing training in Israel that combines somatic therapy with breath work. And that's why I really kind of took the deep dive into it.
Wow, amazing. That sounds like a really amazing journey of starting off from traditional therapy and then moving more into this holistic space. And what is breathwork?
Yeah, that's great. So breath work is, in the most simple sense, it's changing the breath pattern, like the way that you breathe, in order to achieve a different state. And that's why the name is a bit confusing. Some people think that they'll come to a breathwork workshop and we're here to relax. But often, actually, the breathwork that I do in my workshops does the opposite. It activates the nervous system. It allows you to feel more, not less.
Mhm.
So it's a practice, and there are so many different ways and types of using the breath to alter the state of consciousness. And just to say one more thing to orient maybe the listeners who aren't familiar with this, that the breath is the only part of our autonomic nervous system that we can actually have a direct influence over. So we can't meditate unless you're very advanced, maybe to change your liver functioning or your heart rate or things like that. But the breath is in our direct control, which can allow a complete nervous system change, which is really, really a powerful thing. So in a lot of ways, it's the bridge between our conscious, our mind, and our body.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so important what you're saying with the breath being like a bridge. And it is one of the only things that we truly have control over. But it's also very interesting because with breath work, it can really mean so many different things. Like, in yoga there's a whole field of pranayama, which is breath work. And there's hundreds, if not maybe thousands, of different types of breathing techniques, and you can do breathing exercises for for relaxation, for balancing, for focus, for all kinds of different goals. So a lot of people do assume that breath work or breathing has to be relaxing, but that's not always the case. You can actually use breath work for all kinds of different goals and purposes. I was actually very impressed when I was in one of your breath work workshops at the GHI conference, and it was really interesting to go into this lightly altered state of consciousness in such a short time. It was maybe about an hour or something like that.
Mhm.
That it was a very transporting kind of experience. And s- and what's special about like the type of breath work that you do is that it really does bring out the emotions more. It's activating first, but then can you explain maybe like the arc of it, because it's not all activating. I'm curious, how do you tailor the breath work to fit the arc of the emotional journey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's exactly like the word you use, arc, is great because in these sessions, like the breathwork sessions that are maybe oriented towards healing,
Mhm.
and one of the things that facilitates healing is the willingness or the agreement to feel difficult or painful or significant emotions that often in our day to day or throughout if there's times of overwhelm or stress, so we don't have a time to feel them, so they're kind of stored later in this file. Right?
Yeah.
And then they can show up as other things, as chronic stress or back pain or whatever it is. So in the initial stages of the breath work, we're activating the sympathetic nervous system, the places that have this kind of fight and flight response, but it's supported, it's held. And also, unlike when the difficult things happen where we don't have a choice, here each time I breathe, I'm basically saying, yes, I'm agreeing to feel, or I don't want to, and I'll slow the breath down. So that's the kind of intense phase. And then a lot of things can come up.
Mhm.
Um, and then that's followed by this deactivation um, where there's like a period of deep rest, like rest and digest, which often actually people find to be the most healing or transformative part of the whole experience. And some people call it like we need to turn it on to turn it off because we're just going in autopilot. It's like, wait a minute, there's all this stuff happening, and then I let it happen, and then I can acknowledge that it's happened, and then there's this deep feeling of rest and restoration, like you've just done something really big or climbed a big hike, and then you take out the drinks and the snacks, and you can just enjoy the view. So that's kind of how we create the arc in this breath work.
Mhm. Yeah, it's almost like you have to dial it up to and then dial it back down. So you have this contrast, and you're right, like the relaxation part of the breathwork arc really feels so amazing. It's like you just ran a marathon and then you get to rest and relax. It's actually interesting because to compare and contrast a little bit with yoga nidra, um, my understanding is that breath work is more you're more it's more of an active practice. Um, if you're practicing breath work, you have to be actively involved. You're breathing very consciously, and it's actually like I think it's like hard work to keep
Yeah.
track of this conscious, very strong kind of breathing. And yoga nidra is more of a receptive practice. It's more about just letting go, just you're not doing anything. You're entering this state of being and receptivity, and you're just kind of like loosely concentrating and witnessing whatever is happening. But you're not really doing anything actively. It does take you through the stages, through different stages. Like it takes you through an intention setting, a body scan. It takes you through breath awareness. It takes you through polarities and visualizations. And like there's like a whole sequence to it. Um, but throughout this whole sequence, you're in this bridge, this liminal state between wakefulness and sleep. So you're kind of like there, but not really there. You're weaving in and out of sleep. So it's a very passive kind of receptive practice. And and it's just interesting. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on this contrast, whether an active practice versus a more receptive practice. Of course, there's room for both, but I'm wondering if there's times when you would recommend one over the other for different situations or for different types of people.
Yeah. When you describe the yoga nidra, like I feel
Mm.
myself just feeling that invitation and the softness that it offers.
Yeah.
And also really like relating that deactivation phase in the breath work, it sounds really similar where, breath work, it's work and it's hard. It's uncomfortable and then often um often like it's all about the yoga nidra part of the breath work for me personally, my
Mhm.
personal experience. Um and the process of non-doing and just allowing, and the deep rest that it offers. And interestingly enough, also in the years that I've been practicing it, the level of intensity that I bring to the breath work, I've started to dial it down because people would often come for this cathartic and they want to scream and they want to release. And they feel often, as I work with men, so they often feel if I don't have this heroic experience of very extreme emotions and cathartic, explosion, then I haven't done the thing right.
Mhm.
For me, it's all about the second half. It's like, can we get the nervous system back to a deep state of rest?
Mhm.
So, um, so about your question, who I would recommend, like more and more, I'm orienting towards even in the activation phase of the breath work to be much more attuned to how much is too much
Mhm.
and doing more, like more education in the beginning of saying, if you feel like it's too much, then it is too much, and to have that like attunement. And also, because I know it's the Jewish listeners, I call it the Rabbi Akiva method, which is Nichnas b'shalom, Yotzeh b'shalom. As
Mhm.
people were coming to the groups and approaching it in a very masculine way, which is like I have to achieve something, or we have to be very warrior oriented. And then they were leaving completely, well, maybe not completely, but significantly dysregulated, feeling frazzled or feeling like, what just happened? And I think in terms of a healing process, that's actually less helpful and more helpful very often.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying. In the beginning, I also used to think that you have to work very, very hard to to get results, and I've learned that that's not really true. You just have to be present and really attuned to what's happening. But it's interesting because with breath work, the instructions, like I've only done a few breath work workshops, and the instructions are you have to do this circular breathing with no pauses in between, and this like deep inhales, big exhales through the mouth, and no pauses in between. And I find that actually very difficult to do for a sustained amount of time. And and it's interesting what you're saying about like maybe it doesn't have to be that way for everyone, and maybe it's okay to slow down the breathing. Is it okay to well, what would you say to someone actually who is having a hard time just sustaining that breath pattern because it is very challenging.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And um, it's kind of like a tricky thing because with the breath work, the experience is brought about through this over oxygenation of the system. So that's why we say,
Yeah.
okay, it's wide open mouth, and we're not letting the carbon dioxide kind of regulate in the way it usually does. We just keep pumping in the oxygen. So that actually creates the experience. Um, so on the one hand, I would encourage people, at least in the first 10 minutes, like of the session, it goes for 40 minutes, the intense part, to just say, okay, my mouth is dry and this is difficult. And I just continue to breathe. Um, but often I do recommend people, if you've met something that's difficult, we don't have to like breathe through it. It's like it's here. So let's just be with it. And um, and often there can be discomfort in the body that comes up, and there can be this thinking. It's also this like very maybe more Western or masculine thinking. If I just breathe more, I'll get through it or I'll move.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's this is why we're here to meet this thing. And if it's here, then we can slow down a bit and become more curious. And because the music is going anyway, and there's a certain atmosphere, it's like, um, yeah, I really think, like I said, this evolution for me, it's an evolution of saying, it's okay. It doesn't have to be so intense. Like, we don't have to be oriented towards intensity.
Mhm.
And as a practitioner, like, I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but people come to an event with a certain expectation, and then as a practitioner, as a facilitator, I would like to honor that, and let them have an experience. Um, and that's really invited me to step into this role more, let's say, maturely, and say, okay, if someone comes and nothing happens, or they become frustrated, then that's okay. Like, I'm there to hold that too. We're not here to just like create some kind of intensity. We're here to like make room for whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, and especially as, well, I've been training to be a psychedelic, facilitator, and, one of the things that's really emphasized is to let people have their experience and to let go of agendas. So, you're right, like, as facilitators, sometimes and we want people are making big efforts and they're dedicating their time and their energies to showing up and they have expectations, so of course with all my heart I would love for them to have a great experience. However, I really resonate with what you're saying of honoring exactly where they are and just trusting that their experience is exactly what they need, even if it's not always what they want. um,
Yeah.
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 And sometimes people have experiences that are very boring or very, very uncomfortable and distressing or surprising, all kinds of things that they don't expect to happen or don't want to happen. And, and I really, yeah, and I really believe that that is what needs to happen. And we need to just hold space and honor that. Like that is the healing.
Yeah. Yeah. I relate to that. And it's almost like undoing this expectation or this idea that healing is another thing that we can achieve. Like,
Yeah.
just do take the right medicine or breathe in the right way, then I won't have to feel discomfort anymore. Or my trauma will magically like be released, like as if it's
Yeah.
like Harry Potter or something.
Yeah.
Uh, it's like, actually, we're here to learn how to walk and meet life, and life throws all the things at us.
Yeah.
And all we can agree to that, that is the healing. Like, the more we can agree to orient towards life
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
capacity to meet life.
yeah, that's beautiful. Exactly. And all of these journeys, whether breath work, psychedelics, yoga nidra, therapy, just traveling, all of these journeys are in order to meet life where it is outside of the journey. They're all just microcosms of this bigger journey of life. And how do we meet the moment exactly where it is, with acceptance and compassion and without trying to resist or fight what's happening, but to go with it. So what you're saying is really, really, I think it's really beautiful and really apropos. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the music, because the music is a very it's a very big element of journeys and creating these meaningful experiences. So I know that you're into music and you're a musician yourself, and I'm curious about if you could share a little bit about the music that you infuse into the journeys.
Yeah, so I light up when it comes to music because
Yeah,
it's such an integral part of creating the experience. And and I love music, but one of the passions of mine is I have this playlist that's called All My Awesome Music, and I just keep gathering every time I hear something. I just keep putting it in there, and I actually try and make a new playlist for each breathwork workshop that I give. It's partially keeps it fresh for me, but I'm always kind of thinking about the arc that we were talking about, and also about like the theme that we're looking at in the breathworks. That somehow that the music can also create a certain atmosphere or internal atmosphere. Um, and And I like to have the first part of it to be just instrumental and a way to kind of really come in and feel the breath, and then as the experience comes on, to create more intensity or more stirring emotions. And then um and then again in the deactivation, or let's say the yoga nidra style part of the breath work, the harpaya, the resting, to have really nourishing sounds, um, really soothing sounds. And I've also been playing with incorporating like soundscapes, like things from nature, whether it's, sounds from a forest or from the ocean. I even put in the sound of a heartbeat, of a baby's heartbeat. That's something about it, just yeah, it just creates there's like a feeling that comes when we hear these things. So, and then often I'll play also the last few songs, I'll play live music. Um,
Mhm.
thing that I have enjoyed so much and benefited from in some of the psychedelic experiences I've had, of the live music aspect. There's something so nourishing about having someone play music for you while you're resting. It's
Mhm.
uh, a real feeling of comfort. And so, yeah, I guess that's some of the aspects of how music ties into it.
Yeah, yeah. And yes, and the music, it really is. It's so transporting and it's so containing. And the vibrations of the music, they just influence all of the cells in our body. And I guess I'm curious also about music because in classical yoga nidra, they teach that you should have a removal of everything. It should be a completely inward focused experience, and you remove all the senses except for sound. And by sound, they mean like the facilitator's voice, and not to even have music in classical yoga nidra. And I just find for me that the music actually helps me to deepen the experience. And I include music in most of my yoga nidras as well, because also I believe that the music enhances and carries things through better, but it is an additional external thing. Yoga nidra is all about like we take away all the distractions so that the person just focuses inward, and we support that 100% inner focus. And I'm wondering if breath work, if there's different types of breath work, or if breath work also has this kind of debate as well, between how much external support, even through music, do you provide versus, versus supporting a completely inward experience with, as limited external input as possible.
Yeah. It's also, to me, it ties back also to your question earlier about, is it for everyone? And also,
Yeah.
can, can the breathwork practice meet people in different stages? And I think, like, let's say for the uninitiated or people who are not used to this kind of work, which you're inviting in yoga nidra or in breathwork, which is to intimately meet yourself. We
Yeah.
basically, many people are trying to do the exact opposite of that. Like, let's keep ourselves as busy as possible so we don't have to meet it. So, or let's say uninitiated, or if you're earlier on in your journey, I think the music is really supportive and also gives a feeling of safety. It's like, okay, there's a soundtrack, there's a movement, there's music, and it carries me through.
Mm.
But saying that, in my training, when we were integrating breathwork into like a therapy session, the way that we do it there is, the way I was trained there is, there's no music, and it's just you. It sounds very similar to the yoga nidra. It's you with the client and they're breathing, and you're just checking. So what's happening now? And if I put my hand here, what happens? And slowly checking. And it's quite powerful that it's more, let's say, client directed, not directed by their own inner world.
Mhm.
Um, so that's on the one-on-one level. In a group setting, I think I haven't really done it without music, but I wonder, yeah, I wonder
Yeah.
how it would be. I think it could be, yeah, it's putting a question in my mind, like maybe we could play with that for people who've um who've had a bit more experience. And at the same time, I know that the other voice in me says, yeah, but the music is so rich and it brings such a layer of depth to things. Why would I wanna do it without music?
Right, right. Right, the music is so amazing. I'm also very curious what would happen in a breathwork session without music, and, people make all kinds of sounds in a breathwork session. I'm curious what kind of symphony would be created by the group on its own, but yeah, I totally hear you. If something is working, why give that up? So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's also like, 'cause, you can have a lot of, yeah, strange sounds and noises and
yeah,
screaming, and so that's why I also adapted my breath work. Like, I found also because I run these men's groups, and there's a lot of pent-up emotion, particularly
yeah,
things like rage and anger that don't have, um, much of a let's say, safe expression in our world, in our society. So those emotions as just pure anger or rage comes out a lot. And I found
mhm,
actually getting a bit much for some people that come to the group. It's like, whoa, what is happening here? Um, I remember we had a photographer come once, and he's like, "Am I in an exorcism?" Like, didn't know. We didn't prep him before. So when I was working together with a friend of mine, we didn't prep him like what he was stepping into. So then I started using these headphones that allows people to have a shared experience, but still internal, and also a feeling that, okay, I can make noise and I'm not disturbing people as much, so I can, like, let go more. So that's also how I've managed to kind of adapt the needs of the group and the individual at the same time.
yeah, yeah, that's a really great solution, and yeah, what you're saying, like people have stress. There's so much trauma in Israel. There's so much trauma all over the world and stress and just living in the modern life. People have all kinds of so much pent up emotions and then like you create this really special space where those feelings are not only allowed but also encouraged and safely supported, and that's just such a special thing. I'm also curious about integration after breath work. In the psychedelic world, there's a lot of emphasis on integration. And this is what makes psychedelic assisted therapy different from just, recreational use. One of the things that makes it different is that there's a very big emphasis on, okay, so you have this experience, and then what do you do afterwards? How do you land and weave it into your day to day life to enhance and support your day to day life? And I'm curious with breath work if there's a integration component to it as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy you're asking that. It's in many ways very similar to the psychedelic work, that as you're meeting these, let's say, big emotions or different themes, then you want it to inform your life. Otherwise, it's just another experience that we've had. Wow, that was amazing, or wow, that was intense. But back to, yeah, let's get back to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the challenges that I've personally sort of working with, is that as I'm doing these groups, it's beautiful. There's a short integration circle afterwards, a chance to land, and we eat together, and then we hear a few voices from the room. But then, the people walk out through the door, and it's like, what next? So there are like integration practices that I recommend, but I'm not sure to what degree people are following up. And
Mhm.
so recently, I've put more emphasis in what I was speaking to about earlier, which is about like how do we build capacity to meet life. And I've opened up a course and a group for men who've had maybe a psychedelic experience, maybe they've done breath work, maybe they've done therapy, but are now looking to build more skills as community, which I'm putting much more energy into because I really believe in it. And I'm also seeing in this kind of, it's funny to maybe call it an industry, but if this is healing wellness industry community, like the fireworks are in the big experiences. It's like, wow, I have a great breath work. And that was an amazing, let's say, ceremony or journey. But not everyone wants to stick around for the next part of the train ride, which is slow and grueling and has setbacks. But for me, that's where the magic is. But it has in some ways, it's less marketable. It's like, oh, what are you inviting people into to be
Right.
to be messy with life? And So yes, I kind of acknowledge the challenge of that, and that's just my kind of almost like a new direction that I'm going in is to have more of that work. That's why I'm actually focusing more. Um, because really, yeah, I really feel otherwise we can get into this endless loop of just chasing this peak experience.
Mhm.
And
Right.
like, that was when I felt alive. But at home with my kids or in my job, no, so then it creates this split, like I'm one way in a breath work or I'm one way in an expanded experience. But then, so yeah, I guess it's like an ongoing question, but that's to me, it's about community and skill, like building skills,
Mhm.
capacities, um, and that you need both. You do need like an expanded state to know what's possible. For many people, it's like otherwise you can't interrupt the rhythm of our life, and then we need to somehow bring that into life.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's so amazing that you're doing this course with integration and skill building for men. I think that that's just so needed, and wishing you a lot of hatzlacha with that. It makes me so happy that you're doing that. And I'm curious, what are some basic integration practices that you recommend to people in general after breath work?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll just say one thing before that is the course of
Gotcha.
a grounded soul, because I feel this is like the two poles. Like the soul just
Yeah,
wants ah, but
yeah.
how can we also land in the ground?
Right, how can we ground the clouds?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with the integration practices, like again, like I kind of know in some ways the community that come to these events, and if I would recommend a very deep or thorough integration, it probably won't happen. Um, so I suggest like choosing a practice that you're most comfortable with, whether it's being in nature or journaling or even some people who do tefillah or hitbodedut, for 5 minutes. Like to make the commitment before you've left the room that in the next 2 or 3 days, I'm going to spend 5 minutes to revisit whatever I was with,
Mhm.
and and often then I can get that commitment. And my hope is that if you do the 5 minutes, then you'll do more. But it's about like slowing down enough for a few minutes to interrupt this speed of life that we're all living. Well, that's one practice, one way of practicing. And the other thing that people find really helpful is I always share the playlist of the night on the email the next day. And I encourage like people like put on the playlist, it'll take you back there, which is another reason why music's so good. Like you
Yeah.
hear that song and you're like, oh, I remember how I felt in that moment. And then it takes you back there and reawakens the experience again.
Yes, yes, yes. Another good point for for including the music. But I really like that integration for the 5 minute practice. It's really not asking for too much, and 5 minutes can lead to six or seven. So, and I like how you're also letting them choose what would be a meaningful practice. That it's not just like, oh, you have to meditate for 5 minutes or you have to go outside. And if everybody can choose their own meaningful practice that helps to be more grounded and more present in life, bringing back these teachings and whatever you've gained from the journeys. And sometimes the integration, I find that it also we can make it consciously, but a lot of the integration I find also happens on a subconscious level as well as you're going through the day, just kind of like noticing. Am I making different choices? Am I thinking a little bit differently? Am I experiencing things differently a little bit? Am I noticing a little bit more or a little bit differently than before the breathwork journey? And if that stuff is already happening on a subconscious level, then just like paying attention to these little details and how they might be um, playing out in the very mundane day-to-day life can also be an integration too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I didn't mention, but I think this is another important part is in the longer workshops. The workshop you went to was a bit shorter because of
Yeah.
conference, like a bit limited in
Yeah.
time. In the longer workshops, I do a kind of a double integration at the end that already starts the process. So after people come out of the restful state and pass around some fruit and some drinks and whatever, and then there's an option to either journal or to turn to the person next to you and have a chance to share
Uh-huh.
and do some witnessing. So we do a sharing that's without advice or feedback, where someone can just share their experience is felt a little bit. Um, and then we come back as the circle, as a full group. And then the kind of the floor is open and anyone who wants to share can share. And often in between the shares, we can check, like, is anyone resonating with that? And also encouraging people to share as a way of contributing to the group, because often that's like how we can learn from each other's experience. So some people say, what do I need to share my experience with the group for? Yeah, on one level, maybe you don't need to, but on the other level, if you do, and then that allows other people to learn from your experience or say, oh, I also had that, or that was similar for me. Then we're also creating this like group kind of way of processing the experience. So there's already a little bit of that happening, and then that can continue like in the subsequent days.
Yeah, yeah. Do you encourage people to stay connected, like the group members after?
Right. Yeah, well, I've got this WhatsApp group. It's funny you say that because the recent feedback I got, it's so interesting. Like on the one level, people coming for breath work, and on the other level, with like people coming for connection, and that's
Yeah.
what creates the magic. And at the end of the sessions, like we hang out, and I put on music, and there's a chat. Like we don't have to rush to leave the venue. And some people have asked me, like, yeah, like how do we connect more? And a few people become friends through the groups. But it's something I want to focus more on in the coming year, is how to build community, because there's all kinds of people coming to these groups, but they share something in common, which is that they're on a journey. And
Mhm.
that in itself undoes this aloneness, especially that men hold. Like, I thought I was the only one who feels that way. And it's like all of a sudden you're in a room with like 12, 15 guys who are being vulnerable or sharing some of their challenges or some of their successes. And that in itself is like tremendously helpful.
Yes, yes, that is so there's so many healing, elements that are happening. The
Mhm.
breath work, the music, but also the community container is really not to be underestimated, especially, like, when trauma happens in the context of relationships, which for a lot of people it does, and even in a collective level, then it has to be healed in that context as well. Healed through safety in relationships and safety through collective, through groups. So it's amazing that you're creating these containers.
Yeah, I heard this. It really hit me. I don't know which podcast, but I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about these healing experiences. And he shared, whoever it was, that 80% is the container, 20% is the modality. And there's
Uh-huh.
wisdom in that. It's like, yes, you can't, it'd be difficult to put on a flyer, come for a connecting, eat some fruit and drink some tea.
Yeah,
Um, so you need a modality to kind of anchor the experience, whatever,
yeah,
Nidra or breath work or whatever it is. But what really creates the possibility, or a huge part of it, is this 80%. Like, what is the space that I'm in?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's about the container and just the energy that's brought in. So, I wanted to also ask you, with breath work, if there's people who really shouldn't be doing breath work, who is it not for? With yoga nidra, it's mostly for everyone, but sometimes if people have, like, certain medical conditions, then it's contraindicated to do certain things. So, I'm wondering with breath work about the contraindications because we are doing very, very active kind of breathing.
Yeah.
So I imagine that's not for everybody.
Yeah, totally. It's good that you ask. Like, what I love about breathwork is it is quite safe because, in contrasting with, let's say, a psychedelic experience where once you take the medicine, you're floating down the river. That's
You're on the ride, yes.
and what I love about the breath work is that you're choosing with every breath.
Yeah.
So if it's too much, you can slow down. But even that being said, for people who have significant psychiatric condition, like if it's things like schizophrenia or bipolar, things that can be, or psychosis that an intense experience can activate or create an onset of something significant, then definitely recommends not to. Um, and then there is some discussion about women who are pregnant. These intense breathwork practices that increase the heart rate is not helpful, or can be potentially harmful. Or if you have a significant heart condition. But that being said, that if the facilitation is right and attuned, then you can moderate the breath to meet the person where they're at and have a gentler experience. And in some of the practices, they recommend then if breathing through the mouth is too much, then you can breathe through the nose and there's oxygen coming in. Maybe it's less wow, but you can still create that kind of internal atmosphere.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's great. So you can adapt it to different people's needs, but also keeping in mind that there are certain medical conditions that we need to be mindful of. And
Yeah, totally. And also,
Mhm.
the one more point is
Yeah.
also about the specific traumatic conditions.
Mhm.
I do a bit of work with soldiers as well, and in the last 2 years,
Mhm.
have had the opportunity to run soldiers retreats for reserve soldiers and people from the OTEF, from the Gaza envelope as
Mhm.
well. And again, it's this attunement because, especially with soldiers, where they come and say, "Look, I'm not interested in talking." And I say, "Well, you don't have to talk because we're just going to breathe and see what happens." And then a lot can start coming up, and it can be
Yeah.
fun. And often, then, if that a lot is not supported, or if it's too much coming at once, then the body can go into freeze, which I've seen in breath work, which are just like a shutdown. So we're wanting to use that education component of the workshop to help people meet their limits and learn how, which is just as important as meeting. The thing is to, like, okay, I've I'd can, like, until here, this is
Yeah.
enough, and I'm good. So knowing the specific traumatic conditions, I think, is just as important as we can't know everything, of course. But I wouldn't approach a regular workshop the same way I would approach a soldier's workshop. And in terms of the support that we need to bring into the room
Mhm.
and the safety, like, is really important.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like there's some big differences there, but that also makes me think of, there are a lot of people who hold trauma that they do know about, unconscious trauma that they actually don't know about. And with breath work, because it can be such an intense experience, I'm hearing you talking in a very trauma informed kind of way and meeting people where they're at and, not exceeding their window of tolerance. Um, and at the same time, this is one of the this is one of the things that can happen is a person can get into a very intense state, and they can step out of their window of tolerance and get triggered sometimes. So I'm wondering, how do you approach that? How do you bring them back to grounding if you're finding that a person really is getting just too overwhelmed, too dysregulated, it's just too much?
Yeah, we this is like a real cornerstone, and it is a challenge because you don't always know. It's not verbal, and you don't know
Right.
exactly what's happening.
Right.
But one of the ways that people are supported during breath work, which I didn't offer at the conference, um, is through supportive touch.
Uh,
And as it can be, well, in the yoga world, it's part of the practice. You help adjust the postures and things like that.
yeah,
But in
yeah.
a traditional
With permission, with consent.
exactly, which is what I'm getting into. It's like in a psychotherapy, it's like touching is the biggest taboo, right? Because there's
Mhm. Right.
abuse and different things like that. Um, so in the beginning, I offer two forms of supportive touch. One is to assist the breath itself, which is certain pressure points that can help the breath move. And the second one is about like emotionally supportive touch. that often when a person's going through a difficult emotion, having just a simple hand on the shoulder or a hand on the heart or holding a hand can allow that wave to pass through. Um, and that's of course with consent, and we discuss it, and also how to ask for help, how to say if it's precise, or to say I don't want this kind of help. And again, for the men's work, often asking for help in and of itself is a kind of repair, because
Yeah.
I just put up my hand and asked another man to help me. This is huge.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then when that's met, like when you ask for help and then it's met in a precise way with touch, it can be really, really in a subtle way, very, very special. And I did a group this week on Sunday night, and one man put up his hand. And we have these hand signals that I teach.
Mhm.
For help, I want more, I want less, um, indicating with our hands. And he put up his hand for help. He wanted his hand to be held. It was for about 30 seconds. And then he waved me off like I've had enough. And it was precise. It was really helpful for him and allowed him to come back into regulation contact, and continue the journey.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. And the magic of therapeutic and supportive touch, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful example of that. Okay, I know we need to start wrapping up for today, so I want to be mindful of our time, and just want to, as we close off, I want to invite you to share about your offerings and where people can find you, and any concluding words of wisdom that you want to share with listeners who may be struggling or having a hard time sleeping, going through stress, trauma, anxiety, stuff like that.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. So the name of my practice is called Echo, and the website is echohealing.com. So you can jump on there and get in touch with me. And I also have a WhatsApp group for our men's community, which is international, with
Mhm.
live offerings, and also digital, like meetups on Zoom or online. And I have a private practice as well, where people come to work with me one on one. If you're
We'll
interested.
have all that in the show notes as well.
Thank you. And I wanted also, this is like really meaningful, is if you connect to some of what I've been talking about, you can also listen to my music on Spotify and explore some of the themes. So that's in terms of connecting, and in terms of a message, like to really encourage that healing is not a destination. Like we're not trying to get somewhere, that things will improve as we agree to walk this path. It will get better. Life will get easier. But that we're not trying to reach some magical fantasy Disneyland, that I'll eliminate all problems from my life. That's not our goal. That's not our orientation in my understanding of healing. And that when we can commit to going on a process, that things will get better because of our commitment, not because of our attachment to the results. Um, and that everyone's journey is unique. So if this breath work or yoga nidra or psychedelics speaks to you, great. And if there are other things, other modalities that you're drawn to, we're not trying to copy paste someone else's journey. We're trying to invite in what's really what we're really being called into.
Thank you. Yes, this is yes, I really, really appreciate what you just said. And we're at the end of the day, like Ram Dass said, we're all walking each other home,
Yeah.
and the journeys can be different, but we're all headed we're all headed the same way. Thank you so much, Moish, for coming on the show and for sharing about your beautiful breath work practices and all of your wisdom around healing. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, and just really, really, just from my heart, really, really appreciate this. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been beautiful to be able to explore these topics. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation with Moish Feiglin and myself, feel free to like, follow, share with your friends, and leave feedback either online or offline if you feel called to do so. You can also find more information about Moish's offerings in the show notes, as well as information to join the Nale Yoga WhatsApp community, through which you can stay connected on the most recent updates and happenings. Hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to meet you back here again soon for more transformational Yoga Nidra journeys and soulful conversations. Be well for now.